All right, welcome to your Newsmax Daily for Wednesday, February the 12th, 2025, Abraham Lincoln's birthday. Our 16th president born on this day in 1809 in the great state of Kentucky, which is one of several states that recognize today as a holiday, along with Ohio, Michigan, Connecticut, Missouri, New York, and couple of other states. President's Day, which is coming up this Monday, the 17th, is a federal holiday marking George Washington's birthday, which is actually on the 22nd of February. But President's Day, considered by many a day to recognize Washington and Lincoln's birthday all in one. It's also Darwin Day, marking the birthday of scientist and naturalist Charles Darwin, who was born on this day in 1809 as well, in the UK. And in Washington, topping the news, and there's plenty of it today, Marc Fogel, the 63-year-old American school teacher released yesterday, surprisingly, unexpectedly released yesterday from a Russian prison, arrived at the White House overnight.
We got him home, and he's healthy. It looks good, actually. To me, you look damn good, I'll tell you that.
I think when expectations are low, I feel like the luckiest man on earth right now.
I bet he does, and amen to that. Fogel was draped in an American flag. Spent 3 years in a Russian prison after being arrested for having medical marijuana. His 95-year-old mother, who had reached out to President Biden, also reached out to President Trump during the campaign.
I had to get her back home because I would have had big trouble with his mother.
This is Newsmax Chief White House correspondent James Rosen, who brought us the breaking news from the South Lawn yesterday.
All right, we want to go back now to our Chief White House correspondent, James Rosen, who is tracking the breaking details, incredible news, the release of teacher Marc Fogel, who had begun serving a prison sentence in Russia. James, welcome back in. Good to see you again. Tell us what you're hearing.
So we have received a word from the administration in the form of a statement from the White House National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, saying that today, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who had been instrumental in the Trump administration's negotiations for the ceasefires in Gaza and Lebanon, has left American airspace with Marc Fogel. This is the American teacher who was arrested in Russia upon entry because apparently he was carrying medical marijuana with him, and who was sentenced just a couple of years ago to 14 years in prison. And so this is an extraordinary moment where, once again, the Trump administration is securing the release of Americans detained overseas. We recall that last month, the Special Envoy Rick Grinnell was able to return to the United States with 6 detainees, Americans who were detained in Venezuela. The statement from the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, says that, and I'm quoting now, President Trump, Steve Witkoff, and the president's advisors negotiated an exchange that serves as a show of good faith from the Russians and a sign we are moving in the right direction to end the brutal and terrible war in Ukraine. So apparently, with this reference to an exchange, the United States is also releasing some number of Russian citizens who we have been holding. The statement from Waltz continues, since President Trump's swearing in, he has successfully secured the release of Americans detained around the world, and President Trump will continue until all Americans being held are returned to the United States. By tonight, the statement concludes, Marc Fogel will be on American soil and reunited with his family and loved ones, thanks to President Trump's leadership.
That's Newsmax chief White House correspondent James Rosen. And if you have been watching Greta Van Susteren for some time, then you know she has followed the stories of several imprisoned Americans for a long time.
As I'm sure you know from watching this show, I have long advocated for the release of Americans in Russian prisons, including wrongfully detained Jimmy Wilgus. And while I'm thrilled to see Fogel in that plane on his way home where he belongs, it's also time for Jimmy Wilgus to come home. It is not just tough for Jimmy, but also for his parents. Here's a reminder of who Jimmy Wilgus is.
An American musician joined a band, and now he's a prisoner in Russia. The entire United States knows about Paul Whelan, Brittany Griner, and Trevor Reed. So why not this man? Do you recognize him? My bet, probably not. I didn't until now. He was arrested in 2016, but I did not learn about him until recently when his family reached out to me. I sat there waiting. This is Jimmy Wilgus. He's a self-taught musician, a producer, and a family man. In 2010, Jimmy met a guitarist from Belarus, and together they formed the band Wicked Monkey. Wicked Monkey's success in Eastern Europe eventually took the band to Russia. While on tour in Moscow, Jimmy fell in love with a Russian woman, and the two married in 2014. Jimmy settled into life in Russia and partnered with local musicians and began building a state-of-the-art recording studio in central Moscow. But all changed on November 7th, 2016. That's when Jimmy Wilgus was suddenly arrested in Moscow. Russian police taking Jimmy into custody, demanding he sign their documents written in Russian and telling him that once signed, he could go home. Those Russian language documents turned out to be a confession statement. The crime Russian police say he committed was allegedly exposing himself to a minor while entering the elevator of his friend's apartment after taking out the trash. Wilgus claims that the bathrobe that he was wearing that morning accidentally opened up. Russian authorities disagreed that it was accidental. In his closed-door trial, Jimmy was forced to accept a state-assigned Russian defense lawyer, and neither Jimmy nor his wife nor a U.S. Embassy representative was allowed inside the courtroom. Jimmy was convicted, sentenced to 12.5 years in a Russian prison. Jimmy is now 54 years old and has spent the past 6 years in the notorious Mordovia penal colony IK-17, a high-security prison 8 hours south of Moscow. That is where prisoners live years of hard labor.
That's Newsmax host Greta Van Susteren. That prison camp that she just mentioned is where Marine Paul Whelan was also held before he and WNBA star Brittany Griner were freed in a prisoner swap last year. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is holding a briefing in the James S. Brady room this afternoon where she'll recap some of the incredible events I'm sure that have occurred in the past 24 hours, perhaps talk about the Russian prisoners that were released in exchange. And she'll likely be peppered with some stupid questions about Doge and Elon Musk and if we're going to buy Gaza and some of the other things the president said during his bilateral news conference with the King of Jordan yesterday, who said that Jordan will take 2,000 sick children from Gaza as President Trump continues pushing Jordan, Egypt, and other countries to take in Palestinians from Gaza.
What you just said, 2,000 children with cancer or other problems, and that's really a beautiful gesture. That's really good, and we appreciate it. And we'll be working on the rest with Egypt. I think you're going to see some great progress. I think with Jordan, you're going to see some great progress. 3 of us, and we'll have some others helping, and we're going to have some others at a very high level helping, and the whole thing will come. It's not a complex thing to do. And with the United States being in control of that piece of land, a fairly large piece of land, you're going to have stability in the Middle East for the first time. And the Palestinians, or the people that live now in Gaza, will be living beautifully in another location. They're going to be living safely. They're not going to be killed, murdered, and having to leave every 10 years, because I've been watching this for so many years. It's nothing but trouble. Everyone's being killed. They're being robbed. It's like living in hell, and they're going to end up having a great home, great families that don't have to get mugged and killed and beaten up and harassed by Hamas and everybody else. And I know we'll be able to work something. And what you just said about the 2,000 is fantastic. It's so beautiful. It's music to my ears. But we're going to be able to work something, and I know we'll be able to work something also with I believe, not 100%, but 99%, we're going to work out something with Egypt.
President Trump alongside King Abdullah II of Jordan. And we get more from Rob Schmitt.
Welcome to Rob Schmitt tonight. The King of Jordan at the White House this afternoon as the president put on a foreign diplomacy clinic. Trump's full transparency continued today, allowing the media in to the Oval Office to ask a flood of questions with the king in the room. The president confirmed today his plan to take over Gaza once again, move the Palestinians out, give them a chance at a real life under stable Arab governments, and developing the 25-mile waterfront Gaza Strip into something more than a terrorist headquarters where indoctrinated Arabs are used as human shields for an Islamic faction that they are forced to honor at gunpoint. Here's Trump.
You've said before that the U.S. would buy Gaza, and today you just said we're not going to buy Gaza.
We're not going to have to buy. We're going to have Gaza. We don't have to buy. There's nothing to buy.
Well, of course, the media went berserk after he said this. They started throwing a fit, demanding answers on how that's even possible. We're just going to possess this strip of land. They forget that the status quo is having the Palestinians living in tents on top of rubble for the next 10 years. The ones calling the president crazy for this plan prefer to let 2 million people live in a bombed-out wasteland until the West sends enough aid money for Hamas to fund the next October 7th. And then inevitably, Israel comes back in and blows it all up again, because that's the status quo. So in that context, moving the Palestinians out, and out for good, doesn't really sound so crazy. The president today also laying down a red line for Hamas. The hostages are to be released by this Saturday at noon or else, something that Netanyahu mimicked and gave the exact same order later on. Trump saying the images of recently released hostages forced this response. Take a listen.
Look, I looked at the hostages that came in, and they're emaciated. It looked like something out of the 1930s. It's an absolute disgrace. And I think they saw the way the world viewed it, and they're looking for a reason not to send more, because they're all, you take a look at that, it looked like it was a concentration camp, which essentially it was. It looks like they came out of the Holocaust.
And showed you that video there as he was speaking, obviously, to see what these people look like and just how awful it is, the savages that have done this to them. I want to show you a look at a before and after of 3 hostages in captivity for close to 500 days. Look at Eli Sharabi behind me. Just terrible. Reportedly, one man still being held has been chained to a wall for hundreds of days, living off one daily piece of pita bread. How long could you survive being chained to a wall with one piece of bread? We're dealing with animals, and the patience is ending. Here's more.
You know, I have a Saturday deadline, and I don't think they're going to make the deadline personally. I think they want to play tough guy, but we'll see how tough they are. The people that they have living are in such bad shape because they're sending the most healthy people out, because they don't want to send the least healthy people out. And there was an uproar when they saw the people from yesterday. So these people are, so I don't want to do 2, and then we do another 2 in another week, and then we do 4 in 3 weeks. No. They either have them out by Saturday at 12 o'clock or all bets are off.
Strength. It's tough to get used to after the last 4 years, but that's what it looks like.
Rob Schmitt, host of Rob Schmitt Tonight on Newsmax. King Abdullah was eventually questioned by the international media as well.
Your Majesty, should we expect that the Jordanian response would be part of a coordinated Arab response?
The response will be from a multitude of countries, Arab, international. I know the Europeans want to step in. And again, we'll probably have to look to the help of the United States to make sure that COGAT, which is the clearing agency on the Israeli side, makes this as efficient as possible, because 2,000 kids, the best way to get to them is by helicopters and get them straight to our institutions. I also believe that quite a few countries would also probably like to take some of those kids and have them treated in their hospitals.
And we go back to Rob Schmitt Tonight.
How funny is it that the Arab world has been lambasting Israel for so long about the treatment of the Palestinians, and yet when it comes time to actually do something, nobody wants to help. It shows you how fake all their empathy really is for these people. Nobody wants them. Why would Israel want them? We send nearly $2 billion a year to the nation of Jordan. Did you know that? $2 billion a year America sends to this country. And that's a huge chunk of what they bring in, by the way. They're a small country with a small economy. And for the first time since that aid began, we are going to get something for that money. Trump is flexing America's vast power and influence for the first time in decades. What a weapon he has that nobody has ever used because they've been too scared. And this president is going to use it to force peace through common sense in the Middle East.
Catch Rob Schmitt tonight and every weeknight at 7 p.m. Eastern. Greg Kelly continued coverage of the Democrats' ongoing meltdown over President Trump's relationship with Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency.
I just love what President Trump is doing with Elon Musk. It makes sense. He is one of the greatest geniuses of our time. He is not encumbered with the silliness of raising money and going out and getting people to like you and eating corn dogs in Iowa. He has just brought his talent to the table, and President Trump is confident enough and smart enough to realize this is a huge opportunity for him and for the country. What President Trump is doing here, I don't think any other president would do. You know, they actually have fragile egos, and by this point, we should know President Trump does not. What he goes through, what he went through, no. Might be big, but it's not fragile. There's a difference. Anyway, take a look.
It seems hard to believe that judges want to try and stop us from looking for corruption, especially when we found hundreds of millions of dollars worth, much more than that, in just a short period of time. And we want to weed out the corruption. And it seems hard to believe that a judge could say, we don't want you to do that. I'll ask Elon Musk to say a few words, and we'll take some questions. Elon, go ahead.
Sure. So the
media is waiting and begging. They're hoping, praying that there will be some sort of friction between these two, some sort of departure. It's almost like there's a mind meld. And President Trump is right. The judiciary is giving him a hard time, but I I think that's under control. More on that in a moment. All right, Elon now.
If we don't do something about this deficit, the country's going bankrupt. I mean, it's really astounding that the interest payments alone on the national debt exceed the Defense Department budget, which is shocking because we spend a lot of money on defense. But if that just keeps going, we're essentially going to bankrupt the country.
You see, we've all heard that before, right? From a politician, from somebody who raises money and asks for votes and is always looking at 15 different things in their image and this, that, and the other thing. He doesn't have to worry about any of that. And I get a really good feeling from him and, of course, the president. Next.
Could you mention some of the things that your team has found, some of the crazy numbers, including the woman that walked away with about $30 million,
right,
et cetera?
Well, we do find it sort of rather odd that there are quite a few people in the bureaucracy who have ostensibly a salary of a few $100,000, but somehow manage to accrue tens of millions of dollars in net worth while they are in that position, which is, what happened at USAID. We're just curious as to where it came from. It seems to be mysteriously they get wealthy. We don't know why. Where does it come from? And I think the reality is that they're getting wealthy at the taxpayer expense. That's the honest truth of it.
Talking about Samantha Power. She's a big Obama person. She ran USAID, one of these people who doesn't think she needs to wear makeup, and that's fine. But let's talk about her earnings and what she was earning and what she was worth. The salary at USAID to run the place is $183,000. Now, she's married to a lawyer who does well. And this number, I think, going back to 2018, what was she worth back then? Something along the lines of $6.7 million, all right? Now, according to reports, and it's a little bit tricky here because we have not seen the documentation ourselves, but there is a lot of evidence floating around out there that indicates she is now worth, just one presidential term later, $30 million. That's a lot of money. How did she make it?
If you look at, say Treasury, for example, basic controls that should be in place, that are in place in any company, such as making sure that any given payment has a payment categorization code, that there is a comment field that describes the payment, and that if a payment is on the do not pay list, that you don't actually pay it. None of those things are true currently. So the reason that departments can't pass audits is because the payments don't have a categorization code. It's like just a massive number of blank checks just flying out the building. So you can't reconcile blank checks.
Does that make sense? It does to me. And who's writing these checks? Something called the Bureau of Fiscal Policy, or Bureau of Fiscal Service. It's inside the Treasury Department. And for some reason, suspicious reasons, the swamp doesn't want this thing touched at all.
We've got this truly absurd, a do not pay list, which can take up to a year for an organization to get on a do not pay list. And this, we're talking about terrorist organizations, we're talking about known fraudsters, known aspects of waste, known things that do not match any congressional appropriation, can take up to a year to get on the list. And even once on the list is not used. It's mind-blowing.
Look, I know it's not perfect sound bites, but this is poetry for those of us who have been waiting for this kind of cleanup, a genuine one, not just something on a bumper sticker. And yeah, the swamp hates this big time.
Greg Kelly reports 9 p.m. Eastern on Newsmax. Do not miss it. Those clips of Elon were from inside the Oval Office yesterday. He was spurred on by Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's been speaking out against Musk and Doge, claiming her net worth is more than $12 million. Again, the average salary of a senator is around $170,000, $175,000 a year. Musk and others saying if she's admitting that she's worth or claiming she's worth $12 million, she's probably worth a lot more than that. And you may have also heard the rumor about Chelsea Clinton getting millions of dollars from USAID, which at this point is just a rumor. It's just that. We must let the investigations and the facts play out. Not only with U.S. aid, but with all of the uncoverings and stories and accusations by Doge. And while we're talking about money, the stock market opened deep in the red this morning, like the Dow down 400 deep after a worse than expected consumer price index reading of a 0.5 percentage point, putting inflation at 3%. Analysts were expecting 0.3% and an inflation rate of 2.9%. This comes right after Fed head Jerome, the profit killer Powell, said there was no need to rush into any more interest rate cuts. Powell is speaking on Capitol Hill again today, this time to the House Financial Services Committee. Yesterday, he also said that the Federal Reserve will not, at least under his watch, be developing its own cryptocurrency, which should be good news for cryptocurrency, but most crypto is also lower thus far today. And if you're listening in your vehicle right now, specifically a Ford, listen up. Ford has issued a bunch of recalls for concerns over EV batteries, fuel pumps, and other things for the Bronco, Escapes, Fiesta, F-150 Lightning, the Maverick, the Lincoln Corsair, some other Lincolns as well. So check with your dealer. I should say some other Fords and some other Lincolns as well. Be sure to stay up to date on all of the news and breaking developments throughout the day on Newsmax, N2, and Newsmax.com. Once again, there will be a lot of breaking developments. It's the Trump White House, after all. It begins each and every day with Wake Up America, followed by National Report, Bianca De La Garza, American Agenda, Carl Higbee, Chris Salcedo, Greta, Rob Schmitt, Finnerty, Greg Kelly, Chris Plant and the Right Squad, and much, much more. I'm Tony Marino. Thank you, as always, for checking out the Newsmax Daily. Share it with your friends, family, and anyone else. There are now 2 more days until Valentine's Day. Don't forget, and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Information. Truth. Is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.